Well, good afternoon. So, I'd actually like to start by asking you all a question. Given where we are in the world, I actually think I know what the answer is already, but I'm going to ask you anyway. How many of you have tried to learn a new language before? Show of hands. Almost all of you, of course. How many of you have succeeded? Almost all of you, of course. I know where I am. Well, you are not alone. Okay, there are approximately 1.2 billion people learning a new language around the world. Now, the vast majority of them are learning just one language in particular. A language, of course, spoken by everyone in this room. There are at least 800 million people learning how to speak English. And many of them are doing so to get out of poverty. Now, the reason for this is simple. In most countries, you can earn between 25 and 100% more just by knowing English. But what about the other 400 million people? Why are they learning a new language? Well, I ask these questions because I am part of a team that is trying to make language education free for everyone in the world. It's called Duolingo, and we have about 300 million people using the app to learn a new language 100% free. Now that means that we have one of the largest data sets of language learners in existence. And we have studied millions of people spanning every single country on the planet. Our researchers created this map, and it shows us the most popular languages to learn in each country around the world. And it tells us a lot of interesting things. For example, it shows just how popular it is to learn English. Most of the world is learning English up there in green. But then we noticed something that to us was very unexpected and very strange. If I zoom in here, you'll be able to see it too. I'm sure you've already spotted it. Sure, the data told us that the most popular language to learn on Duolingo in Sweden is Swedish. Which to us sounded like a mistake, right? We thought it can't be that hard to learn, can it? But you know, why was this? Why was the most popular language to learn in Sweden Swedish? Refugees, exactly. So Sweden saw more than a 10x increase in the number of refugees seeking asylum there between 2015 and 2016. And as they arrived, they all began looking for a way to learn Swedish for free. But where did all of these refugees come from? Well, many of them came from Syria. As a matter of fact, there are now more registered Syrian refugees on the books. There are more registered Syrian refugees than the entire population of Los Angeles. So there are more than 6 million registered Syrian refugees. Now, this was shocking to us, of course, but I think it was so shocking, both because we're in the United States, but also because we're simply not used to looking at graphs like this. We're used to looking at graphs like this. Right? Same up and to the right trajectory, completely different focus, completely different meaning. I'll give you an example. The UN actually came out with a case study not so long ago, a study that showed that more people have access to mobile phones than toilets. That says something about our priorities, doesn't it? When I first heard about this, I wasn't sure whether to be impressed or ashamed. But then I was reminded that over the years, we have actually received thousands of letters and emails from people who are using technology, mobile phones, to get themselves out of difficult circumstances and change their lives for the better. Here's one of them. I'll read it to you. It says, "Learning German was a necessity for me to advance in my career and broaden my options beyond Syria. Living in a country torn by a hideous war and daily terrible news can be unbearable, but Duolingo always found its ways to lift up my spirit." This person deserves far more credit than we do, of course, but we've received many letters just like this one. And when we discovered what was going on in Europe and in Sweden and over in the Middle East, we decided that simply replying to these letters and publishing our research was not enough. So we decided to go further. Much further, actually, about 6,000 miles further, to be exact. And we decided to travel from the United States to the Middle East to find and meet the people that had been writing to us. So our journey begins here in Gaziantep, just over the border with Syria. Show you some pictures of the journey. Now, the first person to let us into his home and into his life is a man named Ale. Now, he actually protested against the Syrian government when things started to turn bad there. And he was arrested during one of these protests and dragged off to jail. But as he explained to us, this was no ordinary jail. He said that he was placed in a small cell with 50 other men, so small and so crowded that they all had to sit balled up with their knees to their chests, unable to stand up and unable to speak for 1 whole year. He said that he did not get to see the sky for 1 year. He described it as a pit and a grave that he thought he would never get out of. But he was released, thankfully, and after he was released, he fled to Turkey, which is where his story takes more of a positive turn, thankfully. And the first thing he did was teach himself how to speak some Turkish, using free resources like ours. And he's now become a school teacher, teaching Arabic language from Turkish. He knows the language well enough now, and computer programming to the kids in Turkey, trying to help make their lives better. And he's doing much better himself, as you can see. Next up is a remarkable lady named Noor. Originally from Iraq, she fled after a car bomb exploded outside her house, shattering the windows to the house and sending bullets flying in all directions. She told us a story of fleeing in her car with her family while their house turned into a literal war zone. Now, she also fled to Turkey, and she also taught herself how to speak Turkish as soon as possible using free resources. She now speaks 5 languages to complete fluency and has become a successful software engineer in a part of the world where you don't yet find many female software engineers. Her name has a meaning. It simply means the light, which I think is quite appropriate. Now, I have just one more story for you today, and it comes from the final stop on our journey. And we were granted last-minute permission to enter this place. It says Azraq refugee camp in Jordan, and it is one of the largest refugee camps in the world. This is just a small part of it. So Azraq refugee camp has a population of 37,000 refugees. And out of 37,000 refugees, 60% of them are children. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, this is a very difficult place to gain access to. And even once our team was inside, they were very hesitant about how much they were willing to show us. See, they didn't understand why we had come there to see them. And after a little while, we found out why they were so worried about us being there. Well, it turns out that Azraq actually uses Duolingo to teach their refugees English. This is excellent. So why would they be worried about us being there, of all people? Well, it turns out that they were worried we may have come to sue them for copyright infringement because they had been putting our logo on these certificates that they give out to the students for passing these free language courses. They were actually worried about this. They were very relieved when we told them that this was not a problem and that they could keep doing that as much as they wanted. And they introduced us to this young man. This is Mahmoud. Mahmoud is 15 years old, and he has been at Azraq since he was a child. See, when his family fled Syria, they had to move between more than 30 different towns before they arrived at this refugee camp. 30 times they had to move before they found somewhere safe. Now, we were introduced to Mahmoud because he is just completely obsessed with learning. He's obsessed with his education and language. And we asked him what he would say, because he's very eloquent, so we asked him what he would say if he could send a message to everyone in the United States? Which is a very risky question, to be honest. It's a risky question to ask anybody, maybe some of you as well, but he did a great job. He said this. He said, "I want them to know about me that I never gave up with the war circumstances that we are in." He said, "I love to learn so that life would continue." That's how he thinks about his education. That's how he thinks about technology and language. Now, we met many countless people on our journey, and as they led us into their homes and their lives, slowly but surely, those data points became real people, and those charts I showed you became faces. And they all seemed to have just one thing in common. They were actually not learning a new language to earn 25% more or to get a better job. They were learning a new language to survive. Because for them, learning a new language represents a chance at a new life. It's a chance for them to find home again. So all of this left us with just one final question. What do we do about all of this? What do we do with everything we've learned? We decided to turn the footage from our journey into a documentary for the whole world to see. The documentary is called Something Like Home, and we released it for free on World Refugee Day 2018. It's since been watched by more than 1 million people around the world, and it promotes the United Nations Refugee Council petition. This is a petition that asks the governments of the world to make sure that all of the refugees in their country get access to a free education. So, as we go forward, we're building our product not just for the 300 million people we are proud to serve, but for all 1.2 billion people learning a new language around the world, and for all of the reasons that they're doing it. See, we think we can make a positive impact in their lives. And the same thing goes for every single one of you. Because in today's highly connected world, whether we like it or not, your work is going to have an impact far beyond what you could ever imagine. And while you won't always get to decide who gets impacted by your work, you do get to decide how they are impacted by your work and what work you choose to do as a result. Because for all you know, their very future could be in your hands. Thank you very much.